Hey everyone, welcome back today to another episode of Berlinnoir. And for today's episode, we are going to be working on some garden allotments. They're going to be right here, south of the Tempelhof airfield that we built in the previous episode. And to start off, I actually did, as you can see here, a tiny little section there of allotments that I did off camera, just to really see what props I had for it, because I looked through the workshop before this episode to find some stuff that I didn't have prior to this, and look for some, well, I guess, gardening things, so like vegetables, and which there really weren't many of. I did find a few, which were nice. I had no idea they existed before, but they're actually decent assets, and but also just some general gardening tools and things like that. But yeah, so I did that one tiny little part there off camera just to try to get a feel of what I had, and yeah, just get comfortable with it. Because I mean, yeah, I've never built allotments before. They're pretty unique, at least to the compared to what we have in the U.S. I can't think of anything off the top of my head of any state or city that has anything quite like this. And I know they're very, very popular in Germany, but also really the entirety of Europe. But from what I could gather, Germany is definitely the allotment kings, I guess. In Berlin alone, that's the most in Germany. But it's reading into it. It's kind of funny because I mean I know like there's the general stereotype that Germans are very orderly. They like to follow the rules. They like their rules a lot. So that type of, I guess, preference definitely carries over to their allotments. And as I'm building this, I am pretty certain that I am breaking a number of rules and regulations when it comes to allotments in Germany. From what I read and watched some videos, they're very, very strict. Everything from the maximum size or maximum area of your land that can be used for any sort of structure, like these little sheds, and they're not houses, or I don't know, they're miniature houses that no one lives in, I guess, or I don't really know what else to describe them as. But that is one thing I wonder if anyone actually lives in these, because I know it's not, or you're not supposed to, but I find it hard to believe that some people don't live there, or at least spend a decent amount of time there. But yeah, as I was saying, anyways, that like something like the total area that you can use for any sort of structure, as I said, and something like how the maximum height that your garden hedges can be. And I'm sure, these network hedges that I used, which I used the network versions rather than the prop ones, just because I could, more easily draw these little allotments better and, go around the curves much easier, since the prop ones don't curve. So that's, would have been much harder. But yeah, either way, I mean, yeah, I guess if you're German, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Either whether or not you have allotments yourself, or, either way, I know they're just well known and popular across the country. But although I did read also that in general, rules have been lightening up a bit as time goes on. Mostly just to attract a younger demographic, since it's certainly understandable that younger people would be turned off by what they think as, fairly absurd rules. But yeah, so looking at the pictures of, I'll throw up the aerial view right here of the aerial view that I have, and you can see the allotments are fairly neat. They look fairly repetitive, They almost kind of look like suburban homes, in the U.S. Very repetitive, not too much going on. But modern allotments, at least in Berlin, looking at like pictures like this and Google Earth, there's a whole lot more going on as far as like vegetation and just overall growth of trees and bushes. And so, like, for instance, I didn't put a single tree in this entire area that I built. And just to comment on this on screen, these are supposed to be garden gnomes. They don't exist on the workshop, I don't believe. So I use this not tiny, but the statue, and it's colored kind of like a gnome if you shrink it down really small. So that's what that is. But anyways, as I was saying, the old ones that I was looking at, the old allotments I was looking at from the aerial view, they're very orderly, and they didn't appear to have any trees. And if they did, I didn't see any. So going back to what I was saying with the modern allotments, there's just trees and bushes, a lot more growth. And while they still have to obey the allotment laws or rules, regulations, whatever they're called, it seems as though compared to back then, the rules back then were far stricter than they are even today. And it's kind of funny, I guess, considering how, at least I think, the restrictions today are still kind of absurd. But of course, I can't really say anything because I'm not German and I'm not familiar with the culture like that. But I mean, there's a similar thing in the US, and I'm sure parts of Europe too. I'm not sure because it's more of a suburban thing in the United States. But we have our HOAs in the US, which are homeowner associations, which are just naggy people who constantly complain that your bushes are too big, or your weeds are getting a little out of control, or your paint is starting to chip off in a tiny little spot on your wall alongside your house, which that happened to me last week, a couple weeks ago. I had to get it painted just because a couple small chips from kids kicking rocks from the school bus. But yeah, so that's the comparative, I guess, similarity between the strict nature of allotment gardening and the HOAs of the US, which, as I said already, that really only pertains to subdivisions in the suburbs. So, outside of downtown, whereas, housing closer to downtown, I'd say they don't typically have any sort of organization like an HOA to, say what people can, grow in their backyard, or if they can have a basketball hoop in their front yard, tiny things that you would think are fairly insignificant, but HOAs in the suburbs kind of freak out about depending on where you live. And it also entirely depends on where you live, because HOAs vary greatly. But I guess I am curious, honestly, to know if that is a common thing in Europe. I mean, I'm sure they're not called HOAs, but at least, in the UK, since it's English. But across Europe, if there's communities outside of, the downtown part of European cities, if there are any sort of organizations like HOAs that exist that, set rules as far as, like I said, basically what a homeowner can or cannot do with their home. But yeah, because I honestly have no idea. And just when I was, building this and looking up what allotments were and such, that's just what kind of came to mind, because, just the very strict nature of, the rules and regulations of your own property, because it is your own property. So, you'd think you can do whatever you want with it. But, obviously what you do on your own property, of course, affects those around you. So that's what the purpose of an HOA is, at least in the US. If you have weeds growing 10 feet tall, then the person next to you isn't going to enjoy it that much. And if they're trying to sell their house, then they're, the people buying are going to be a bit concerned with the weirdo next door with 10-foot high weeds. So that's, at least the reason in the US why we have those sort of organizations. But yeah, let me know, because I'm genuinely curious if those exist in Europe, because, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, that's, I guess, enough of that kind of rant. But back to what we're doing here on screen. So there is a lot of copying and pasting, of course, just with the repetitive nature of this. But it's even though it is repetitive, it's you have to kind of focus a bit more on the details, because the details shouldn't be necessarily repetitive, because when they are, then you can kind of tell in game when something is completely just copied and pasted without any sort of variation between it. So I did go after I did the copy and paste and try and add small variations. Like if I removed a few of these little houses, I'm going to call it, because I don't know what they're actually called, even though I know they're not houses, but I removed those and replaced them with different ones, just so it looked a little less repetitive and a little less copy and paste. But so here is where I basically do everything from scratch, because the first half of the episode up until this point has been a lot of copying and pasting and basing that off of that very early little segment that I did, like I said, that I did off screen. Since what I built there, I did a lot of copying and pasting from that, so you didn't actually get to see really me placing things down and doing stuff like that. So I guess the order of this episode maybe is a little weird, because typically I'd do stuff from scratch and then do a lot of copying and pasting towards the end. But in this case, since I did do that small bit off camera at the very beginning and basically like I said, copied everything from that into the other areas that I built, I wanted to do something completely from scratch, so you guys could at least see something that I'm building without doing too much copying and pasting, which I'll still do some, of course, but it's going to be within this area that I'm currently building. So I'm not going to take from the other area. So just so you can see everything, if you're curious, what certain props are and what, for instance, this little mulch thing, which is part of an allotment pack that I happened to find on the workshop, which was weird, because when I was I'm pretty sure I was looking, before a few weeks, probably close to a month by now. Yeah, probably about a month before this episode, for stuff related to allotments, because I knew that was something I was going to eventually have to do, since there are a lot in Berlin today, and there were even way more back then. If you look at the aerial view map and compare the two, there's a massive amount that were, like for instance, the ones I'm building here, these were in a few years destroyed to make room for the expansion of the airport. So, this is one example of something that will not exist for too much longer, at least in this time period. But yeah, so anyways, so as I was saying, with the props for the allotments, they're not new, but when I was searching for allotments and stuff, I just didn't find anything, and then randomly recently I was searching again, and I happened to find some stuff for allotments. But I also found these, so when I'm wanting them to be used as, or at least appear as, is some sort of vegetable. So whether it be like a leafy vegetable, or maybe a lettuce or something, not really sure, but that's what those are supposed to be. They're just called plants, at least when on their description there when you're scrolling through your assets in game. So I'm not really sure what they are supposed to be, but they're just supposed to be some sort of vegetable. Which, so I think back then compared to today, there's a lot more vegetable growing and less gardening, just in the sense that you're growing plants just for the sake of that. That of course still is a big part of it, but looking at maps and pictures from back then, it seemed back then it was really strictly just gardening for the sake of having a manicured grass and manicured hedges. Just, I guess, going back to the German sense of being following strict guidelines and stuff. That's what it kind of seemed like, just to show off your skills at something. That's at least how I'm thinking it was. I could of course be totally wrong. Correct me if I am wrong. All the Germans watching this, this is, at least from an American perspective, something, again, I have no familiarity with anything like this at all. So it was, doing the research and then building it. It was certainly different, but it's probably something, at least allotments, probably something I'm not going to do on camera anytime soon or ever in the future, just because they're very time consuming. And like, this is a relatively short episode, less than 20 minutes, especially compared to my recent videos, which have been, pushing 30 minutes. But relative to what I actually build, I build a very small area, so this episode really isn't that short considering how small of an area I actually build. But yeah, here's one weird thing that I came across, which I'm still having lots of issues in game, which I won't get into because the episode's almost over. But no, that's just another random thing that I just noticed today as I was building. Copying, pasting, not sure why. It doesn't affect anything else besides just when I'm copying and pasting whatever it is. I couldn't even find the exact item or the exact asset, I should say, that was causing that issue. So yeah, I don't know what that is, but yeah, it doesn't cause any other issue outside of that, at least as of now, so that's good. But yeah, so we are getting close to the end of the episode. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next week. If you have any ideas, something you want to see, let me know. I have one thing that I might do, which, I won't say, but, yeah, let me know what you want to see get built next and, in the coming episodes. And I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.